Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Knitting with Annie. I'm Annie Lupton of Boho Chic Fiber Co. And this is the time when I answer some of your questions and share a little bit of the behind the scenes process of my work as a knitwear designer. So thank you for joining me today. It's been a couple weeks since I've been back. I think I'm settling into the realization that every other week is going to be better for me for posting these. Every week just seems to not work out very often. So I'm going to stick with every other week, and hopefully that'll give us enough content to share, for me to share, and also give me enough time in my schedule to actually squeeze filming these in. But yeah, I've been kind of busy for the last couple weeks after Rhinebeck. We had a big nor'easter come through. I live on Cape Cod, and the Cape was like really affected. Like most of the Cape lost power. It was just kind of crazy. We didn't have power for like 3 days. And so the kids' schools didn't have power, so they were home, and it was just kind of chaotic and crazy. So I didn't get any work done. And then once we did get power back, I had a lot of catch up to do. So I wasn't able to do this last week, but I'm here now and excited to dive back in and answer some of your questions. If you hear like a constant kind of humming or sound behind me, sorry about that. My daughter's rock tumbler is on in the other room, and it just like tumbles for like days straight. So if there's like a little hum back there, sorry about that. I don't think it should be too loud though. So I have a few questions to go through today and things to talk about. So the first question, I've had a bunch of questions asking along the lines of, where do I get inspiration from for my patterns, like for designing them? And I did kind of walk through generally how I get inspiration in a previous episode. I can't remember which one, but I talk about sometimes I'm inspired by color schemes, or sometimes if I see a sweater out in public, it'll inspire me to do something similar, or maybe it's like a geometric pattern motif. The possibilities are endless for where to get inspiration from. So if you want to hear a little bit more about just generally how I get inspiration, you could find that podcast or that vlog episode. What I do is in the notes underneath the heading of all the episodes, I kind of give a little synopsis of what's in it and what I talk about. So you could look through just those and see which one has it. But I thought it'd be fun to do a little bit of like a run through of specifically how this specific pattern I was inspired to do this one. And now I'm realizing that I did not pull the sweater that I wanted to pull to show as well, but I can link it below and just talk about it instead. So this pattern I just released last week, and this one is called Honey Folk. And I don't know if you can see, but there's these geometric like honeycomb shapes, and some of them are garter and some are stockinette in between that run on the front, and similarly there's smaller ones that run down the sleeve. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of walk you through how did this one come to be and what inspired it and all that. So basically, I got Nora Gaughan's Twisted Stitch source book. These are twisted stitches, which is just a 1/1 cable, essentially. This book is wonderful. She's got lots of different stitch patterns that you can use. You're welcome to use them as a designer if you want to pull the exact same one out, or you can kind of use them as a baseline and then tweak them and change them to make them a little bit more your own. So this book I love. I've done several twisted stitch patterns so far. These patterns I like to put the word folk in them, so that way it's easy to see which one is part of like that collection of patterns. So basically for this one, it started out as I was inspired by this motif that she has on the front here initially. And you see how she's got a little hexagon in the middle, and then there's like diagonal lines and stuff. So first I was like, I love like that hexagon, that's so cool. And then when I was sitting out on my balcony one day, we have these little Romeo Juliet, I think they're called, style balconies on our bedrooms, on our house. And they're really open, so they're not like kid friendly. So we had to put up like plastic chicken wire kind of stuff, staple it on so that like our kids or the dog don't like fall over the edge. And I was sitting out there knitting once, and this plastic netting that's there, it's all these little hexagons is basically the shape of it. And when I was looking at that, I thought, wow, that looks just like a flower, like with one in the middle and then the other ones around the edges. And so it's not exactly like this hexagon, it's but it's just hexagons, none of these diagonal lines. So what I did is I designed first my summer folk pattern, which is the one I forgot to grab, but it's a little white tee, and I released it this summer, and it has these little flowers on it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's maybe 5 flowers, and they're just a little hexagon in the middle that has this garter, and then the outside hexagons that are stockinette. And I just put 5 of these little flowers on the shirt, and I just really loved making that one. And when I released that one, I had a bunch of people comment and say, oh wow, they look like little honeycombs. And you know, a hexagon is like a honeycomb shape. So I was like, oh yeah, that's cute, that makes sense. And I had so many people that kept commenting, talking about, I wish it was like a full-on honeycomb. And so I was like, well, that's a great idea. So what I did is I basically combined those flower motifs that I had made the hexagon shape. And it's a combination of twisted stitches for the diagonals and then a garter line for the top and bottom. It's really simple to make. It looks much more impressive than it is. It's very simple. And I combined them all together for this pattern here. And basically I wanted to have the same thing. If you look close, you'll see like that's the outside of the flower and that's the inside. And then they're kind of staggered. I liked it with the garter in some and the stockinette in some. I think it gave a little more interest to it than just like all stockinette. So yeah, so that's basically how I thought to make this make a true like honeycomb sweater. And then I had to decide, once I knew I wanted to use that motif, I had to decide, how do I want this on a sweater? Can I somehow make that top down? Top down seemed too complicated for me with all the different sizes and the yoke depth. So I was like, I don't want to do top down. And then I thought, could I do like a boxy drop shoulder, which is a very common shape that I use. And I think I just wanted to challenge myself a little more and because I don't do the raglan shaping very often. So that's what this one has here. You can see it goes down. The increases are all along diagonally like this. That's a raglan shaping. And I honestly don't make them that often because they don't tend to fit my body the best. I have like a really broad, kind of like boxy shoulders. And so I find that like the drop shoulders just really fit me personally well. But it's been one of my kind of challenges to myself to work on more designs that are just a little bit out of my comfort zone. And I knew that this would be a little bit trickier to make considering you have, I had to figure out how many honeycombs would fit down the sleeve, and I realized that I'm gonna have to make these ones a little bit smaller on the sleeve, and it's a slightly different pattern. They're a little bit smaller so that it fits on the top. And I also had to, if you can see here, when it starts out, there's less, and then they increase as the increases work. So I kind of just figured that out as I went, and I'm super happy with the end result. This is one of my new favorite sweaters. Part of it is because it was a lot of hard work, and I'm really proud of it. And then also just because I love this mustard color is like my go-to knitting color. I have a lot of sweaters in it, and I just find it matches well with my wardrobe. And so yeah, so I love how it turned out. Again, it's called Honey Folk, and you can find that one on Ravelry and stuff, and I can link it below. And I'll also link the Summer Folk so that you can kind of see where this one morphed and like came from. So yeah, so that's kind of the, that's like the inspiration process from like beginning, like seeing the motif on the book and then seeing it on my balcony, and how it kind of morphed and became what this one now is. So every pattern has a slightly, a different process of how I'm inspired and where I draw my inspiration from. But I thought it'd be fun to share like this specific one. yeah, so, okay, the second, oh my gosh, I'm really unprepared today. I'm sorry. My dog right before this got into a bowl of grapes that my son had left out. And I don't know if you know, but grapes are like very toxic to dogs. She's really not the smartest dog. She eats everything. And so I had to make her throw up to get the grapes out because it was like a lot. Like she could have died from it. So I'm a little frantic now because that's what I just dealt with. She's fine now, as you'll see. She's probably gonna eat that rock and cause more trouble. It's never a dull moment in my house. So I forgot to grab this other thing, but the next question that I have was, do my hands ever hurt when I knit? I knit so much, or do I ever find that my hands hurt when I'm knitting? And what do I do about it? And how do I get better? So yes, my hands definitely do go through phases of hurting when I use them too much for knitting. I find that it happens more often when I'm working on projects with like tiny needles, like size 3 or even size 2, really small needles. If I'm knitting a lot, if I don't take breaks and knit something bigger, like bigger weight yarn, it happens more often. And also with like plant-based yarns, or if yarns have like some acrylic or nylon in them, like the synthetic fibers, I just find that for some reason my hands, I guess there's less give with the yarn. It's like more taut, like alpaca can be similar, where there's not as much like bounce and stretch in the yarn. And that just kind of hurts my hands sometimes. So when that happens, if I have a deadline, I will sometimes just push through it, but it's not that often that I have deadlines. So I have to kind of force myself to not knit for a few days straight. Ideally, it's like a week of no knitting, but I can't always do that. So I'll make myself not knit for several days and then kind of ease back in. Every once in a while, it's like really persistent and a real pain. Icing them can help. Like we have these ice packs for my kids' lunch boxes that kind of bend, and I'll put that on my hand. Recently, somebody actually very kindly sent me some like cannabis oil that you can massage into your hands, and like a balm that had like cannabis in it. And I've used it a few times, and I can't say did it help or not, because I was also I like had stopped knitting because it was like really bad. But I would massage it in, and people say that helps. So if you struggle with that, you could try that. And I forgot to grab it, but I will find her website and link it below. She was really sweet to just send it to me. And I can't remember the name, I'm sorry, but I will definitely link it below. And again, I can't say like 100% that it works and how well it works, but if you're wanting to try something else, I think it's worth a shot. I have been using it since like whenever my hands get into that funk. But lately I've been pretty good actually. I find that worsted weight, like DK and worsted weight yarn, if it's 100% wool, I really don't have that problem unless I'm like crazy fast knitting. And I just haven't had the time lately to knit that much, and so that's probably why too. And I've been knitting like worsted weight and not quite as often as sometimes I do. So so I hope that's helpful. Anything repetitive like that can be like damaging to like your muscles and stuff. And so my biggest advice would be just take a few days off. I know it stinks, but I think that's like the best thing to do. So I'll link that balm that I tried below. Okay, so a couple more fun questions. One fun question that I got was kind of not knitting related, but somebody was wondering what other hobbies besides knitting do I have? Obviously knitting is like my number one thing that I do, but I do have other hobbies. I'm a well-rounded individual. So I wrote some things down so I wouldn't forget. I really enjoy cooking and baking, probably cooking more than baking. I've been eating a mostly vegan diet for the past like 11 years now. I've had times where I've had eggs or I've had cheese or something, but for the most part, it's been plant-based for like 10 or 11 years now, since before my first daughter was born. And so I kind of learned to cook on this diet. It was when I was like engaged that it was like about the time that I was engaged that I started eating plant-based. And so before that, I wasn't really cooking a ton. I was living in a house with a bunch of girls, and we would kind of like share meals, and it just, I didn't really start cooking and learning how to cook until probably around that time, or when I got married, or my husband would help too, but when you're young, you don't really know how to cook. At least I didn't. And so I kind of learned on that diet. And so it's been really fun to just kind of, I just really enjoy cooking. I don't know. It's fun, trying to substitute and like find substitutes. So, I grew up eating meat and dairy and everything. And so there's a lot of things like from my childhood that I remember eating that are just like all meat or all cheesy based or whatever. And I have a fun time now kind of figuring out like how to make a vegan version of them. It definitely is easier now than 10 years ago when I started. When I first started eating this way, there was, tofu. There's always been tofu, and I love tofu. I'm great with tofu. But there was only like a few vegan meat substitutes that were any good at all. Most of them were like kind of gross in my opinion. And now there's there's just so much more variety. It's awesome. So there's so many more ways to cook. Like for example, now there's something called Just Eggs. That's like a shakeable, it's like a mung bean protein that's similar to eggs, and it cooks like eggs. And so for years I kind of struggled with how to make a quiche, like a vegan quiche, because I've always like really liked regular egg quiche. And I've played around with like different like silken tofus and different chickpea flours and different things. And I've never had one that I like really loved. I've tried so many recipes and like different, my own kind of variations on recipes. But now that there's this Just Egg stuff, it's amazing. I love it. And it makes like such a great quiche. I've been kind of tinkering with like how hot to cook it and for how long, and that sort of thing. But I love what I've come up with so far. And so I really have fun playing around with that. Baking can be a little trickier, like not using eggs. So I feel like I enjoy it less, but there's a lot of cookbooks out there if you're a baker, if you wanted to try like vegan baking. But yeah, that's one thing that I really enjoy. I try to exercise most days, and I am really enjoying biking right now. In the past, I've done yoga and ran. I've never really loved running, but I did love yoga when I did it more often, and I enjoy biking a lot. I just feel so much better after. And then I do some other like kind of crafting things. Sometimes I will spin yarn. Usually I do that in the winter more so than like the summer months. But I haven't spun in a while, but I do like to spin yarn. When the holidays come around, I do a lot of like craftsy kind of things with my kids. I really like embroidery. I don't do it that often, but I use the holidays as kind of like an excuse to like experiment and have fun with that. So I'll make little ornaments for the tree, or we have a couple like little hangings that I've made for the wall that are just like embroidery kind of seasonal ones. So that's always fun. My kids and I recently did needle felted ornaments. I just started doing that with them like a few days ago when they were off school. Needle felting is where you kind of like jab the wool. And I always have a bunch of wool on hand from spinning. And so that was really fun. So like little crafty kind of things I still do. Not as often probably as before knitting was my business, but I still do them from time to time. And yeah, I don't know. I like to watch like Netflix and listen to podcasts, I think like most people, and usually during that I will be knitting. So yeah, those are some of my like outside knitting hobbies. And then I have one more question today. Somebody asked me, I've had this question a few times actually, and I may have like kind of addressed it in a previous one, but I thought again I would make it more specific this time. So someone asked, how do I decide what like pattern to design next as I'm working? And basically, like the simple answer is it's kind of a combination of whatever I feel like knitting myself. And I try to be mindful of the season that the pattern's going to release in. So I'm usually working 2 or 3 months out from a pattern release. So like right now, anything that I were to start right now, like just if I was just going to cast on for something new right now, it would be like a January release. Like right now it's the beginning of November and I'm working for January, mid-January, I think, and on. So I'm a few months out, so I have to think about what's the weather at that time. Now it's just going to be for the next several months, it's going to be just winter kind of designs. I do kind of switch it up in the summer and do like more t-shirts and like plant fibers and stuff like that for the summer months. So I'll keep in mind that. I also like to switch it up, like sometimes I'll release like 2 colorwork patterns in a row, but usually I try to like switch it up, like for my own sake to keep it interesting, but also for knitters, like I'll do try to do different constructions. So like this one was raglan, and then the next one was like maybe like a boxy drop shoulder, and then I'll do a top down, and then maybe color work for one, and then the next one maybe cables or texture. Like I try to switch it up a little bit so it's not just like color work, color work, color work, color work, color work all in a row. And that's just because I like knitting different things, and it's kind of keeps it fresher for me than if I'm like always doing the same kind of design over and over again. I personally like that. Some designers really have a style and they knit like the same type of design, like only one silhouette or only one like technique, and that's what they do, and they do a great job. But I find myself, I get a little bored if I do like the same thing. So I feel like I have a lot of variety. So that's kind of how I just decide to do what's next. Another thing I'll do is like look at my collection of yarn over there. You can see it. I have a couple shelves of yarn, and I'll just see, what have I had for a long time that I haven't knit with yet, or what's newer yarns that I'm really excited about. Maybe I'll look in books and see what stitch pattern pops out to me, and then I'll design something around that. It's really just like what I want to design. Like for example, right now I have 2 projects going. One is kind of on the back burner. I don't know if I'm gonna release it or not. I actually have 2 like that right now that are kind of like tucked away, like, I'll come back to them. I'm not sure if I wanna release them. And then there's one that I'm really working on right now. That's a color work design, and I'm almost done with that, and I'm kind of thinking ahead what to cast on next, and I have 2 different ideas, and I'm not sure which one I'm going to start first. One idea is like a bulky weight, like a boxy poncho. My daughter has this like poncho that we got somewhere, maybe it was a hand-me-down, and it has some cables on it, and I was like, wow, I love the look of that, and she's so cute in it, and I thought, could I make something like that for an adult? So I'm thinking about like a bulky weight poncho, and I brought some yarn. I remember this. I've had this Barocco Mercado, which is just 100% wool. It's like a chunky, bulky weight. So like it'll be good for like size 9, maybe 10 needles. I have to swatch with it. I haven't even started planning yet, but I'm thinking I would like to do like a poncho kind of thing in this, and that would be perfect for winter. So I'm gonna play around with that one. And then there's another idea I had I saw a cable in a book that I can't stop thinking about, and it's kind of all over cables. I don't wanna give too much away, but I might use that cable as like the basis of like a pullover, maybe even a turtle. I haven't done a turtleneck in a long time, so maybe a turtleneck pattern. And I've had this Harrisville Design, their Daylights yarn. I've had this one in my stash for a while, and I love their yarns. And this one is, the Daylights ones are like shades of white with like little subtle flecks of other colors in them. And this one has like kind of like, it's hard to see, but like little brown, a little bit of brown flecks in it, which is like my favorite. White and brown are like my favorite neutrals. So this yarn I just love. and for this one, I'm thinking, yeah, like maybe boxy. I'm not sure. I have to decide exactly what I want to do with the cables, but a cabled sweater with like maybe a turtleneck, since it'll be winter and I haven't done a turtleneck in a long time. So I'm kind of deciding what I want to do. Maybe I'll swatch, and I also have to keep in mind my deadlines for my tech editor. I set those dates in advance, like for the whole year. Different designers do it differently, but that's how I like to do it to keep myself kind of on track. And so I have to see like how close the next tech edit is, and if it's like closer, then I'll probably go with like the bulky one because it'll be quicker to knit and design, hopefully. And if it's a little farther out and I have a little more time, then maybe I'll start with the worsted weight one because it's gonna just require more actual knitting and time to write up probably. So yeah, so that's all the questions that I had today, I guess. Thank you again for joining me. If you see over my shoulder here, there's a little sneak peek of my next design. This one is called, for lack of a better word, because I just could not think of a name, I'm calling it the slip stitch crop. And this one's coming out next Tuesday or Thursday, I'm not sure yet, whenever I can get my act together and get it all ready. It's got these cute little, it's a combination of like little color work and slip stitches that make this kind of interesting pattern on the yoke. So yeah, so that one is coming out hopefully next week. And so stay tuned for that. And again, I will link all the patterns and the that like cannabis, the hemp balm stuff and everything else that I mentioned. I will link it below. Thank you for joining me today, and I will be back probably in another 2 weeks to share more. You can always leave questions below, and or on that form that I'm going to link below as well. So thanks for joining me today. Bye.